the King has praised Jimmy Carter's dedication and humility. The former US president has died at the age of 100. Brokering peace between Israel and Egypt was among Mr. Carter's achievements during his single 4-year term.
When we first arrived at Camp David, the first thing upon which we agreed was to ask the people of the world to pray that our negotiations would be successful. Those prayers have been answered far beyond any expectations.
Carter was later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his humanitarian work. We can now speak to Times Radio's Adam Boulton, who covered Carter's unsuccessful bid for re-election. He also met and interviewed Jimmy Carter. Good morning to you, Adam.
Good morning.
The whole obit that's in the Times is fascinating. There's many aspects of it that will be very interesting to a lot of people they might not have known. In terms of the re-election, the kind of battle against Ronald Reagan, I know this is a very simplistic question, but I'm interested. Did he fail there because, you know, he'd presided over a difficult time economically with the energy crisis, etc., and Ronald Reagan kind of came in with his movie star looks and said, everything is going to be great, I'm going to fix everything? Was it about that, or was it about his demeanour, his personality?
I think it was about the events which happened during his presidency. I mean, particularly, of course, the energy crisis, the surge in the price of oil, and therefore the pressures on the cost of living. But if you look back now at 50 years ago, if you like, 1776, bicentennial year when Jimmy Carter was elected, it was a very different America. And in fact, some of the issues which he represented are now on the agenda now. I mean, not just the fact that Joe Biden was the first senator to support his bid for the presidency in 76, and then, of course, ultimately became president. But a lot of what we've seen, certainly with subsequent Democratic presidents, Bill Clinton and Obama, their internationalism was something which Jimmy Carter very much represented. And everyone quite rightly is talking about the Camp David Accords, the attempt to bring reconciliation in the Middle East. And of course, he talked about the children of Abraham then being obviously Muslims and Christians and Jews. And we got the Abraham Accords, didn't we, under President Trump. But before that, he was very much a push for what we would call liberal causes, things like humanitarianism. He put pressure on the British over independence for Rhodesia becoming Zimbabwe. He took a lead in the United Nations against apartheid in South Africa, and also in America employed in his administration more women and blacks than ever before. So he was very much represented that liberal tide. He also got through the Senate the Second Panama Canal Treaty, which of course now President-elect Donald Trump is saying he wants to revoke and take back control of the Panama Canal. So he represented liberalism. But what brought him down was the fall of the Shah of Iran coming to America for medical treatment, hostages being taken after the American embassy was invaded, and then an abortive attempt sending special forces in helicopters into the desert to try and raid and get those hostages back. That was a disaster. One of the helicopters crashed, 8 people died. And from that moment, Americans felt that their president was very much a loser. And I have to say the mood in that second half of 1980 was also coloured. There were a series of murders going on in Atlanta of black children, which were believed to be racist. It turned out they weren't. But all of that soured the mood. Everywhere you looked, there were yellow ribbons, bring back the hostages. And Jimmy Carter was facing a man, as you say, Ronald Reagan, who came in saying it was going to be morning in America. Guess what? He was going to make America great again.
Yeah, yes. That's exactly the parallel I was thinking about earlier, actually. You met and you interviewed him. I'm trying to get a handle really on, his kind of his demeanor, his image. He looked very much like a kind of, I don't know, quintessential, I know he was from Georgia, but kind of quintessential, more kind of West Coast, kind of blonde, blue-eyed American. I'm trying to think again of when I was growing up in the 70s, but this was someone who was praised for his humility He wasn't someone, he wasn't a show off, he wasn't showy in any way. Was that one of his undoings in a way, do you think?
Well, he was a Southern Baptist. He came from Georgia, the deep South, and he had been, he was the first deep Southern president for many, many years, and the first person who'd just been a state governor rather than a national politician. But he did have enormous charisma, that slow way of speaking. He was known throughout his presidential campaigns for his massive smile. But at the same time, he was highly intelligent. He was a military engineer who had commanded submarines. And behind his incredibly modest demeanor, and he was amazingly modest to meet, he didn't put any ceremony on his personality and was very approachable and would talk to everybody the same way. You were aware that there was someone who was taking everything in and who was extremely sharp, and who, of course, having got to the tree, having started out as Jimmy Who in the US presidential campaign, he had an element of toughness and meanness about him to get his own way, although, of course, it led to him being a one-term president.
A one-time president, 4 years, Sarah Baxter is making this point, 4 years in the White House, 4 decades, making lots of, achieving many things, including winning the Nobel Peace Prize. So out of all of the things that he achieved after he left the White House, which was the most important, do you think?
I think his continued support for development, particularly in fighting disease and dealing with the basics of building houses for people around the world, and continuing with that kind of international philanthropy, and very personally with his wife getting actively involved, physically involved, in fact, in building houses. I think that was the most important thing. He did set up the Jimmy Carter Center for World Peace and was involved in trying to bring warring factions or hostile factions together around the world. And again, I think he set a model for others. I mean, one thinks of Jonathan Powell, subsequently the British diplomat, who's done similar things. And Jimmy Carter was the person who said, you can have a role after being president. You can play a constructive role trying to do good things. And I think what people will probably remember in the end about Jimmy Carter is that he was a good man. And I don't think you can say that about every US president or indeed prime minister.
That's very interesting. Finally, is there one thing that stands out from your personal meetings with interviews with Jimmy Carter? Was it the voice? Was it the smile? What was it?
Well, seeing someone from the deep South with a Southern accent and a dazzling smile, speaking in those Southern cadences, of course, we got to know that a bit more with Bill Clinton. But I think seeing someone like that, rather than being presented as a kind of Burr Ives hayseed, that was what really struck me. He was a type of American that the world hadn't really taken seriously for a long time.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Adam, thank you so much. Thank you for your insight. That is Times Radio's Adam Boulton.